as I described, the $35 million comes from a couple of things. We're looking at about $15 million in healthcare. Originally, I think I said 29, but then the healthcare estimate went up. We also have to fill the $11 million gap where we assigned fund balance last year. We don't have that revenue again, and so we need to find that. So with 15 plus 11, we're already at 26. The big portion of the remainder is a recognition that if we're able to offer anything to our employees, continue on the steps, even a minimal 1% COLA, if we're able to offer that back to them, that's in the $8 to $9 million range. So now we're up around $35 million. And that's that gap is really those three major items with a couple of other increases like things we always anticipate, fuel costs and those kinds of things. So when we look at making sure we take care of steps and COLA, staying on track with that, not falling further behind, addressing our healthcare increases, and covering the fund balance we assigned, that $35 million puts us in kind of an interesting spot. We're hoping to reduce our healthcare costs, and that's part of our negotiation right now, so that's something we need to be looking at. But as many people have heard, we're not going to address that without additional cuts. And the challenge is there are many ideas we can do to further identify small things because we've spent the last 10 years cutting. But we need to look in those places, unfortunately, where we have larger line items. And when nearly all of your budget in any given year is in positions, and also in a circumstance where the cost of the positions is being exacerbated by very quick increases in healthcare costs, that's contributing to this somewhat structural deficit we're dealing with. And so what I'm working toward, with the help of the associations, with the leadership, and to some degree of those of you who've been able to participate in the committees, is how we're going to identify the position cuts that we need to balance this budget. This is not obviously anything anyone's interested in, but quite frankly, we employ more people than the revenue we receive makes possible. In other words, we're not going to contain the healthcare costs, and we're not going to be able to pay our bills with the number of employees we are currently employing. And so meetings over the last number of weeks culminated in meetings on Thursday and Friday this past week. We've identified $3 million in position cuts. Let me say this. We've identified more than $3 million in position cuts. What I'm hoping to apply to the balance, the budget, is $1 million from elementary administrator positions, $1 million from secondary administrator positions, and $1 million from central office administrator positions. While I've indicated we've identified cuts beyond that million for each of those three levels, anything we identify beyond that will be used to kind of reassign and redeploy to help us mitigate some of the impact of these cuts. At the same time, we're looking at position cuts in our instructional line also, the largest line item in our budget. Right now, we are looking at approximately, I believe it's 153 teaching positions. These are not layoffs, these are position cuts. Our turnover usually exceeds 200 positions in a given year, so even with the administrator cuts and the teacher position cuts or instructional level cuts, we expect nearly all of those positions that will be able to provide jobs for those people, because we usually have enough turnover to cover more than that number, but there will be some moving around. One of the reasons I think it's important to identify these now is even not knowing the money that we can anticipate from the county. If we don't make some of these cuts now, the revenue or what we've traditionally received from the county, even at the very highest levels, we'd be in a position to need to do this cutting. And my greatest fear is to find ourselves cutting positions at this level in June. Because the chaos that would ensue eliminating positions like this, particularly when there's that puts everyone at a disadvantage in terms of finding positions. It's a lot of shuffling to happen in the summer when schools are working very quickly to prepare to open. So I don't see a way to move forward in this budget responsibly without identifying these up front. And so my hope is to bring you a budget proposal in January that will address kind of these major areas. And obviously there's much discussion that has to happen because this is a very hard thing. There's not a single person here interested in seeing these cuts. But at the same time, I think it's important that we put that out early so our schools know what to expect with their staffing, as do all of our other offices. But then that will come to you for recommendation, and I think there'll be plenty of room to discuss and, you know, to involve more of your opinions. I know we've already talked quite a lot about what we need to do, but so for right now, I guess probably two statements. One, while we're eliminating positions, our goal is to hang on to every employee if possible. We can't guarantee a perfect fit, but our commitment is to our employees and to make sure that we can offer them jobs. And one of the reasons for starting early is so we're better able to do that. That's also one of the reasons Mr. Friedel talked about the incentive for early notification. We've had discussions with the association leadership about this. We're going to ask them to sign on to this, but the idea is that if people can inform the school district prior to February 15th, if they're planning to separate, in other words, retire or resign, which mostly it's retire. In some cases, someone might know they're leaving, or a family member's been reassigned somewhere and they know they're leaving. If they can let us know by that time, what that will do is make it easier for us to place the positions so that we don't have people, hopefully to decrease the anxiety of those positions that we're eliminating so people don't have to wait to find out where they'll be. But if they can inform us by February 15th, the incentive will be a $500 addition to their sort of final payout. Again, trying to find ways to manage this transition for everybody. So that's the first statement. Our goal is to make sure everyone is employed. And the second thing I'd like to make clear is the decisions we're making about the staffing. I don't think I could state to you that this is based on best practice. This isn't what we hope for our schools. This isn't what, this is quite frankly best fit. We've identified the number of positions we can afford in our schools and in our offices and all that, and we've had to identify the best possible way to deploy them as equitably and fairly as possible. So, you know, again, continuing to talk about what we would like to see, what we're trying to work toward, and the vision for our schools and staffing, I think is an important conversation to continue to engage in. But first, we need to have this conversation, this very hard conversation, about here's what we can afford to do for next year. And, you know, anything that occurs with regard to our revenue changes will go from there. If we get more than we're planning for, then I think we need, as a group, to come up with some strategies for making adjustments to these recommendations. If we come in with less, then we need to come back with regard to cuts. But there's a lot going into this, and so I appreciate everyone's participation so far. If nothing else, one thing I heard a great deal in my entry plan was the importance of transparency. Now, on some level, with so many conversations, with so much going on, it would be absolutely impossible to share everything that was discussed because we're not trying to hide anything, but it's a lot of conversations. So we're trying to capture those and try to be as open as possible about the discussions. But having the teams looking, again, you can see the complexity, just having 5 different teams working on this. And so trying to find ways to make this as clear as possible, which is one of the reasons, again, the cuts that I'm talking about, that I've talked about with our principals, with our leadership, with others, the schools have those numbers in hand, and I'm willing to make those available because we need people to see what we're working with, and they need to understand this. Partly so that we can be very clear about what's real and what's rumor, but also to be clear, people understand the reality of what we're dealing with. So, again, I thank you all for your help with this so far. I know we have much more to do, but I feel I have an absolutely great team to help, and that includes every employee in this district. I've said so many times we have a fantastic team, and I know this team can get us there, but it's a challenging task. So, thank you, and thank you.